Hi, and welcome back to API Can Codes Unit 3, Data Science Practices. In today's lesson, we're going to focus in on different univariate graphs, namely the box plot, bar chart, histogram, and dot plot. Last lesson, students learned the basics of making graphs in CODAP, and today we'll focus particularly on these four examples. For our warm-up today, we have a graph of the monthly average price of a dozen eggs for a bunch of years. Like the last class, we want students to look at this graph and try to interpret different components using the questions below. Recapping lesson 3.2, we learned the basics of using CODAP and the graphs that we created to help us understand data distributions and relationships. Today, we're going to focus in on graphs and figures in one variable. There's a video to kick off today's class. This shows some information about tracking seals and why scientists do it. If you have the time, this can be a great way to engage students in today's content. And the data set that we're going to be using aligns perfectly with this. It is the 4 seals example in CODAP. We're going to give students a moment to just engage, look at the data, see what kind of data it is, see what's going on, see what they notice and wonder. So what we want students to do, and the GIF to the right is showing them how to open the example if they haven't done that yet. And we want students to start off by dragging animal ID onto the map to see what happens. And this should color the points with the different animals that are in this data set. There are 4 in total. Next, we're going to have students create a comparative dot plot by putting animal ID, which is categorical, on the y-axis, and depth, which is a continuous variable, onto the x-axis. And this should show them 4 dot plots divided by seal. We have a couple understanding questions here for students. For example, what does each dot represent? Why are there 4 dot plots? And what does it mean when lots of dots are stacked on top of each other? We also have some questions to look for particular statistics and other features of the graph. For the question, which seal would you say tends to swim deepest? Students can click on the ruler icon and check a box to show the median, the mean, or the mode, which may help them answer this question. As students are looking at the different shapes of the 4 dot plots, we want to focus their attention on seal 546 and 541, and you'll see those come back up in the GIF in just a second. So one of these is bimodal, the other one is skewed pretty seriously to the right, and we want students just to be able to recognize those. Next thing we'll do is go to the ruler icon and check the box plot button. We want to highlight the features of the box plot. So the whiskers end at the minimum and the maximum. In the box plot, you can no longer see individual data values. It helps more with being able to see sort of the quartile 1, which is 25% of the way through the data, the median, which is 50% of the way through the data, and quartile 3, which is 75% of the way through the data. The other thing we'd like students to do is go back to the ruler icon and click Show Outliers. And what this should do is separate any outliers that are in the box plot and put them outside it so that students can distinguish what is and is not an outlier. We want students to create a new graph by dragging speed onto the x-axis. This should create a new dot plot. And this is a good opportunity to talk about the concept of skew. Graphs can obviously be perfectly symmetric. They can be skewed left, where there's a long, low tail off to the left side. And they can be skewed right, where there's a long right tail, or long, low tail off to the right side. With this single dot plot, we want students to think about where the center of the speed variable lies. They might use the ruler icon to add the mean to the graph. This will show a big blue line where the mean is. They can also check the median button to see where the median falls. Students can also use the ruler icon to add the standard deviation or the IQR to the graph to see how much the average speed, how much the typical speed in the dataset varies from the mean speed or the median speed. We're still going to be working with this new speed graph, And at this point, we want students to create a histogram from this. So with the original dot plot, we're going to have students go to the graph icon and group into bins. Once they've done that, they're going to go back to the graph icon and check the box for fuse dots into bars. This will create a histogram, which is a summary plot for a set of data that organizes data points into bins. You can no longer see individual data points, but a histogram could be useful for seeing how many data points fell into different ranges. We want to take a moment to distinguish a histogram from a bar chart. The quick and easy distinction is that a histogram will have a continuous variable on its x-axis, whereas a bar chart or a bar graph will have some kind of categorical variable on that x-axis. Typically, it's a nominal variable. You can see in this example that languages obviously are not a continuous x variable, they're categorical. Meanwhile, year is something that can be put in ordered and is in fact continuous. So the graph to the right is not a histogram. This is a useful chance for students to practice their vocabulary around this. The way that we can tell that this is not a histogram is that the x-axis variable is categorical. It is a college degree instead of something that would be quantitative or numeric. So this is a nice opportunity for a class debate. We want to ask the class to discuss 4 different data sets and which kind of graph might be better for displaying each distribution. For dog breeds at a particular daycare, a bar graph would be better because that's a categorical variable with a count. For scores on the SAT, here a histogram might be appropriate because you can imagine arranging scores from least to most. That's a quantitative continuous, well, mostly continuous variable. Species of birds encountered on a walk around a local pond. Here we would probably go with a bar chart since this is categorical. And monthly rent costs at different apartments in the DC area would be a good opportunity for a histogram since monthly rent cost is a continuous variable. For our exit ticket, still in CODAP, we're going to create a new graph by dragging temperature onto the x-axis. This should create a dot plot in one variable. We want students to think about whether this data would be displayed with a histogram or a bar graph. In this case, students should display the data with a histogram because this is a continuous variable. Temperature is quantitative and continuous. To find the mean temperature, students can click on the ruler icon and check mean, and this should give them that number. As always, thank you for tuning into these lesson videos, and thank you for teaching the API CAN code curriculum.